Hey everybody, thanks for joining. I hope everybody can hear me. If you would, as you get logged in and settled, if you would put your names in the chat box so we're able to have a roll call for later.
It's up there. No. Chat box.
In the chat box. Here. Actually hit your mute button for one.
Right here?
No, the other one.
There we go. Thanks everybody for joining. And again, don't forget to put your name in the chat box so we make sure we have a role for everybody. But we'll go ahead and we'll get started. So what we'd like to get started with is, and let me share my screen and make sure that I do this correctly because I am not very good at this yet. Let's see. Do you see it? Go to your Google Chrome first. That one. Okay. Yes. Thanks. There we go. Okay, are y'all able to see the screen? Just thumbs up if you are. The transportation work group meeting? Good. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and we'll get started, and we do need to keep allowing everybody in, oh goodness, in the meeting as they pop in. So let me do that and make sure there's nobody in the waiting room real fast. Oh, no.
You might have to stop sharing and then go back to the.
There it goes.
Oh, nice.
There we go. Okay, so it'll give a little, there we go. I think we've got everybody out of the waiting room, so we'll go ahead and get started. But if we pause, you know that we're letting people in from the waiting room. So we're gonna go back to the presentation and go ahead and get started. Let's see, there we go. So welcome to our December Transportation Work Group meeting. A quick little outline of what we're going to be discussing is Cynthia is going to give a little presentation on complete streets. I know that in the upcoming months, we're going to be talking a lot about future transportation planning. And these are just some fun little tips and good I guess, planning efforts to keep in mind as you and your communities and your cities that you're in continue to do transportation planning. And also just as a reminder, like we can help, we do these transportation work group meetings, but we also have planning experience as well. So we're more than happy to jump in and help if you do have city meetings or if you do need to help with outreach efforts or things like that for good transportation planning. We're here to support and help. So she's going to give a little presentation on complete streets and why that's important to our communities, our transportation, economic development, our citizens, things like that. Then I'm going to do a quick little presentation on the TxDOT 5310 funds and feedback. So TxDOT has a presentation recently on this, but I want to go over it again for those of you who might have missed it. I definitely like to make sure that we've all heard it, we're all familiar with it, and we're able to give them as much feedback as we possibly can, because what they get is going to impact what their planning is and what our planning is. And then that determines how these funds are allocated and when you're applying for the grant, what you're able to apply for. So it's very important that we're able to share what our community and what our regional needs are in order for them to accommodate those needs with their funding. So I'm going to do a quick little review over that presentation that they had and discuss ways that we can make sure that we're letting them know what we need out of it. And then, you know, just because we're all planning at this time, I want to briefly introduce our transportation survey that will get out before the end of the month, and some things that we'll be looking for feedback on. Then we'll just open up for any general discussion or comments or concerns that you guys have, and we'll close. So kind of a quick little meeting before the holidays, but we want to make sure we met with you guys and we're able to discuss anything that needed to be talked about before we all kind of break for Christmas. So I'm going to let Cynthia get started on her presentation. And if y'all have any questions, feel free to jump in and let us know. We're happy to answer them as needed. And so I will let her go ahead and get started.
Perfect. So to reiterate, just like how Madison said, we'd like to discuss these topics to see what might best fit for our region and perhaps take some inspiration what we could see in our region. In this case, we'll discuss the concept of complete streets, which is a broad movement that a lot of cities and communities have been participating in for a long time. So complete streets are often regarded as necessary elements to a livable and attractive community when residents are able to walk, bike, drive, and move safely and comfortably. This is essentially the basis of it. The accessibility, the accessible use of streets for the diverse population, i.e. those with disabilities, low-income families with no cars. It's particularly important for those who need, whose needs have not been met through the traditional mode of transportation. So older adults who no longer drive, again, people living with disabilities, or just residents who cannot afford their own car. So these complete street projects are designed to prioritize safety, comfort, access to destinations for all road users. So such elements include, working on sidewalks, bike lanes, cycle tracks, wide paved shoulders, special bus lanes, comfortable and accessible transit stops, median islands, accessible pedestrian signals, or curb extensions. Again, it's a broad movement. So although a well thought out design is, not always enough, strategy, policy, and implementation that are place-based and community-based are crucial to ensure that improvements reflect the needs of the community in the area. So we'll jump into what the benefits and challenges are, along with some case studies that I found useful. Yeah. So ultimately, complete streets projects have improved, again, equity and safety and public health while reducing transportation costs in many cities. Complete streets reduce motor vehicle related crashes and pedestrian risks at times, as well as bicyclist risks when well-designed bicycle specific infrastructure is included. It can promote walking and bicycling by providing safer places to achieve physical activity and thus overall healthier lifestyle for many residents. So for example, people living in Dallas has been reported to save an average of $9,000 annually by switching from driving to taking the bus, taking transit. And other areas in California have seen that pedestrian safety features that have been added as part of downtown revitalization efforts include pedestrian-only plaza, wider sidewalks, traffic calming features, and those kinds of projects have spurred a lot of private investment, an increase in sales tax revenue, new jobs after all of this public investment. So projects' effectiveness will fluctuate, of course, upon the area's needs. In particular, sometimes main streets may thrive too, small town main streets, because we're improving street connectivity and allowing everyone, whether on foot, on bike, public transit, to reach community focal points, to reach some of the festivals that we may have, and to reach, just the local businesses that we cater to. Job creation and improving local economy is a pretty big one. Investments in bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure do create or have been seen to create more jobs per $1 million spent than highway projects alone. And they do produce more jobs created as compared to road improvements alone. Some studies have shown that adding complete street elements and requirements can improve just the overall scope of projects. Just including them into your project can be small things. These little investments and requirements can potentially improve the overall healthcare of your residents and increase, again, that physical activity. We're trying to get people moving in the most convenient way. Now, rural communities and small towns are obviously unique. They do tend to have higher concentrations of older adults and low-income citizens, to populations that are less likely to own their own vehicles. And many residents may risk isolation from their community and economy due to that limited transportation options. Accessibility in rural areas is thus improved when services such as public transportation, social service, van pools, carpooling, and ride-sharing services, once those are implemented, they're able to reach healthcare services, employment, being able to shop, being able to do grocery shopping, which is essential for many of our rural residents. And then the concerns and challenges unique to those rural communities have reported that residents of small town are more likely to be hurt on transportation systems in our urban areas. Traffic fatalities do occur more on rural roads due to higher driving speeds. And so, although projects that incorporate flexible and or to alleviate that, projects that incorporate flexible and multimodal designs consistent with local rural conditions that reflect those local rural characteristics are able to achieve safer and more, again, complete streets. So the first case study that I like to jump into is in Gainesville, Florida. It's been ongoing since 2012 and a little bit before that. And it focuses on pedestrian, bicyclists, and transit users. Their goal was to have a sense of safety along corridors, and then, promoting the use of those corridors and increase the surrounding businesses, the frequency to get to those surrounding businesses, to get to those main streets and downtown areas. The corridors that they have identified contains, mix of land uses, including retail, entertainment, restaurants, office, government, manufacturing, job opportunities. Their project was to transform a 4-lane configuration with a center turn lane to a 2-lane configuration. So a lot of design elements that went into it. Overall, the plan included, specific design elements that created sort of a safety feature. Bicycle lanes, wider sidewalks, the typical things you may see. Streetscaping was the biggest one for them because a lot of residents needed to be able to comfortably walk through and not just feel safe, but be comfortable. So with the total number of jobs in the city, it did grow between 2008 and 2013, and the total number of jobs along the corridor that they focused on grew at a faster rate at 21% during this time. Furthermore, bicycle and pedestrian volumes have increased since the improvements, and overall there has been a remarkable decline in the number of crashes. So they were able to actually study these, identify it, and quantify it. And while they did say an exact causal relationship cannot be determined, there are significant improvements made along this corridor that have resulted in increase of economic activity. A lot of local businesses did see more people walking, more people coming in, and more people buying. Residents and visitors overall felt comfortable accessing main streets with improvements, again, in walkability and bikeability. The next case study that I'd like to focus on is in Somerville, New Jersey. This is a most recent plan. Began around 2017, and it included a conglomeration of projects before and after they incorporated a complete street policy program. There have been a transformation to make the city as a destination for new residents and new business. That was one of their main goals. And part of the policy that they wanted to incorporate was that they needed the developers, their engineers, their planners, their consultants to remember that these policies are there to include all road users whenever we are creating new projects and new designs. And yes, perfect. So within this time frame, they were able to do 6 major improvements and projects across the city. And similar goals and actions were found throughout these projects. And one of the major things was that the city joined the Transit Village program through being able to demonstrate their commitment to revitalizing and redeveloping. Through this program, they were able to identify more grants and utilize those grants to improve pedestrian access, as well as improve coalition amongst other municipalities, because this program held about 22 municipalities, and they were able to join that and talk to them and bounce off ideas and then see what kind of projects they could work on together. They also did improvements on their own main street, which led to an addition to this concept of division streets. And they had to modify this due to the awkward spacing and the lack of funding. So they had to be a bit creative in this. And it acted as a transportation corridor to the train station and a gathering place. This area was reimagined as one flat concrete expanse with pedestrian sidewalks marked with bollards and a change in texture. This way, the division street could act as a regular but traffic calmed roadway for most days, and they were able to block it off and create central event space when needed. Something similar to how we see in downtown Bryan whenever they do sort of festivals and parades. So it was really good for the community, and a lot of people considered it a place and rather than just space. Having a walkable and bikeable community was also highly prioritized for both the residents and the projects that they wanted to focus on. They focused more on regional partnerships to incorporate trail systems to promote walking and cycling. And this was so that they could reach out to municipalities and create a bridge so that their residents could visit the neighboring cities, which prompted not only local economic growth in their own city, but as well as the neighboring city, which overall helps both. Overall, projects focused on improving walking and bicycling connections, where the community needed to strengthen, again, economic growth and a healthy population. However, there have been some challenges. Solidifying strong partnerships aren't always easy, and coalition amongst different entities are also tricky to do. And Somerville often needed to do that collaborative effort with local municipalities and counties, with stakeholders, with departments of transportations, and as well as private sectors. So it was a continuous flow of discussion and collaboration. Of course, funding as well is always tricky to find and hanker down on. But funding has prompted the funding they were able to get has prompted modifications on the designs that they wanted versus could do. And so they had to think creatively on what kind of designs they needed to adapt to due to the lack of funding that they had. And then lastly, highway barriers. They are a small town and when you increase walkability, you're able to increase your small town main streets. However, you are surrounded by highway barriers, and that is a design limitation on their part because they could only do so much. But that is a goal. It is to connect access to larger employers that are found along those highways. Ultimately, this comes down to, what's possible in our region and what kind of steps have we taken and what our next steps could be. So some steps that we have taken and that we've seen in the Brazos Valley region is that we've incorporated different concepts in public transportation. The Brazos Transit District and the Brazos Valley Transportation Partnership, they do go across all 7 counties, and they're there to help out populations that need that transportation to go shopping, to go to medical appointments. And that's the first step into being able to really bring people, from one destination to another. Further strengthening that transparency and collaboration may help in identifying potential needs and policies for our local communities as well. And so some best practices that rural designs have been used in is when you have those really big rural roads, it's sometimes hard. And so many have seen creating bicycle lanes that are on the shoulder. They're just wider roads. They're not the traditional bike lanes that we've seen. Or using sharrows, where you can kind of incorporate that idea of shared roads. So when you see that little symbol in that picture right there, you can, your drivers can know that they are sharing the road with cyclists, and they feel a bit more safe. Ensuring that the design policy and guidelines reflect the local rural land use is absolutely crucial. Some of the examples that we see are for a lot of urbanized or suburban areas that just may not fit well. And so it's all about taking that design, taking that innovation, and modifying it for your community. And overall, some next steps could be perhaps that more guided towards our small town downtowns, our main streets. Many of our small communities prepare for parades. We prepare for festivals, celebrations throughout the year. And so in supporting and improving that safety, enjoyment, and accessibility for our diverse residents and visitors is ultimately crucial. Some areas may want to focus on walkable streets, pedestrian safety features, improved bike lanes, or preparing for the arrival of electric scooters, as we've seen in downtown Bryan. We have to, make space, and at the same time, remember that public spaces have to adhere to those community needs and wants, so that we can create that sense of place. Yeah.
Just a little bit to take in, but I think overall it's important. I know a lot of our meetings, we do focus on public transit, and that's extremely important, but it's also important for us to think about transportation holistically. People have to get to those bus stops. It's knowing where people live, how they get to their medical appointments, how do they get to their grocery store, things like that. It's all connected. And so, you want to make sure your downtowns are usable, but you also want to make sure that they're accessible to all of your community members. So that's why we wanted to share a little bit on these smart streets and how we can, help you guys grow, because you might not be there yet, but you might be there in the next few years. And so these are some things to think about as your cities are making these policy changes. How is that going to impact you? How is it going to impact the public transit within your area? And then how is it going to impact your community? And so we are a resource for all of the above. What we can't do, we can definitely help you guys find additional professional resources, and we can help you find funding. There's a lot of money out there that it might not fund that specific, we know TxDOT can help fund certain things, but there's also other sources that we work with on a daily basis that if you do want to come in and do complete streets, or if you want to add wider sidewalks or accessible sidewalks to your downtown area, and then add a bus stop, that's creating that connectivity within your region and within your community. And that not only helps, your transportation within the region, it helps those who need to take the public transit, but it also, helps, your little downtown that you're bringing more business to. And so we're trying to think about it holistically, and how can we make those connections. And so again, if you are interested in doing any of this, if you want some resources, or you want us to help find funding, just reach out. That's what we're happy to help with. But speaking on planning, we're doing a whole lot of planning right now. TxDOT is also doing some planning. They have recently done a meeting, and we want to make sure those of you who weren't able to make it, that we're able to reiterate it here, because it's very important that they're able to get the feedback that they need. So they are currently seeking funding on their 5310 program. This is their program that applies to a lot of our current transportation providers that I know that we as the COG work one-on-one with a lot, but that's improving our mobility for our seniors and individuals with disabilities. And so this is why it's so important, because a lot of you can benefit from this funding. So we need to make sure we give them exactly what we're looking for. So what it is this funding is supported by the Coordinated Public Transit Human Services Plan. And so each of us have our regional plans. There's a little picture of ours. We are all in the midst of a 5-year update, which I know you've heard us talk about already. And that is why this is so important, is because what we do is we reach out to you as our community members. We want to get your needs, opportunities, challenges that you see with transit planning. We want to put it in this plan, but then this plan goes to work. And so the 5310 funds essentially fund projects that address need gaps or objectives identified. And so that's how we're able to come full circle, is we're essentially, we're taking your needs, we're putting them in this plan, and then they're working to meet those needs through funding. And so that's why that participating in this project and participating in the survey that TxDOT is hosting is so important, is because they need to know exactly what the community needs are in order for them to be able to provide funding for these needs. And just a picture of the plan, but we do have it on our website. So go in there and check it out. But we are about to update it as well. So we're going to be reaching out a lot to get feedback on what current needs are, to determine if they're the same as our previous needs, or if we've maybe accomplished some goals, or maybe, you know, with COVID, we have new needs now that we haven't come across before. So just keep an eye out for that, because we'll be reaching out. But essentially, this grant is very important, because the list on your screen are all of the items that essentially this grant can pay for. So we want to, oh, I did get a question. So we are working on the question was if there has been annual updates to the 2017 plan. Not yet, because we're doing it now. We just received funding recently from TxDOT, so we're very excited to do our next 5-year plan update. So Cynthia and I are currently working on the inventory part of that, which I will talk a little bit about at the end of this presentation. And it will build upon itself, because we have 3 of these plans, and so we do them in pieces over 2 years, I believe.
Yeah.
5? It's a 5-year plan update, yeah, but it'll be done within the 2-year period. So we're very excited, and we'll be keeping in touch with you guys on that. And that feedback that you give to us helps identify what this grant can help pay for. So it's talking about accessible buses and vans, which I know I've heard already in just a year and a half I've been here that is a huge need. Contracts for more transit providers. We know that there's just limited services in general, because the demand is much higher than what we're able to provide. So we're looking for being able to meet the need of our rural community members with this public transit. Maintenance, we know that some of the vehicles that we do have need to be updated continuously, and then accessible, all sorts of accessible devices, those aren't cheap either. And so they need to be purchased, they need to be maintained, communications, computer hardware and software, even mobility management. So it's important, again, to continue to do education of ridership. And so this is funding that can pay for all of that. And I know I've almost heard all of these items listed as needs since I started. So it's important that we continue to push our needs, so TxDOT knows what we need funded. So who can apply? Pretty much, I mean, we can help, but we've got our private nonprofits, our rural and our small transit districts, and of course the local governments. So we're here to help. We're here to help you guys get funding when it is available. But again, this is why it's so important. It's because it is open to a lot of different entities. So they are seeking feedback. So these are 4 different ways. The easiest is definitely the web link, and what I'm going to do is I will send it out to everyone at the end of the meeting, but these are 4 different ways that you can reach out to TxDOT to fill out their survey. And I've seen it. It's a quick, easy little survey. They just want to, they want to know the basics. They want to know, those who ride transportation, why you ride transportation, how often, where are you going, are your needs currently being met, are they not? We need to identify those gaps, and so that's what they're doing. They want to know about the obstacles that you encounter, what are your travel times, is it available, how can it be improved? So a lot of these are, kind of basic questions, and those of you who deal with transportation, public transit in your communities, you know this because you speak to your riders, you know what their challenges are. If we can share this with as many people who take public transit or who serve or who have these conversations, would be great. So we can get this feedback again, so then we can get funding to meet these needs, because it's very important to understand what we have, what we don't have, and how we can bridge that gap. So I'm going to make sure we send out that link, but again, there's all 4 options of how to take that survey, but we need to make sure we provide them with that feedback by January 22nd. So we can get that information to them, so we can continue to build our plan, and so we can make sure that we get our needs funded. And Stephanie just said to everybody that they're working on fixing the QR link. So what we'll do is after this, I will see if I can send some of that information via email. So it's just quick and easy to locate that survey, so you can go on and take that as well and share it with those of you with riders that you know, so we can make sure we get that impact from as many people. Speaking of surveys, we're not done. I know it's a lot of survey coming out at you, and so we're sorry that it's in the month of December. But as I mentioned earlier, we have graciously received a grant from TxDOT to update our plan. It's going to be the 5-year plan, and so what we're starting on, the piece that we're starting on is that inventory. And so what Cynthia and I have been doing is we've been working together to develop again a quick little easy survey, because we want to know that very similar to what TxDOT is asking, what transportation types we have available just within our region. You know, how many rides are given? Employment. Are you employing drivers? Are you using volunteer drivers? You know, is that easy to find? Is that challenging? Where are you taking your riders? Is it mostly medical appointments? Is it mostly the grocery store? Are these necessity trips, you know, or are they more entertainment trips? We have all sorts of transportation options within our communities, but we do have a very drastic change from some of our rural communities to our more urban community and what's available. And so to me, that's very important to know, you know, like we don't think twice over here in Brazos County about some of our rideshare options, but our rural communities don't have that. So that's important to note, because, you know, if we can't look at it as a whole, we have to look at them as an individual, because we do have community members that need to travel to different locations, and we want to make sure we know what they have available to them in order to help serve that need. And of course, what are the regions, you know, served? A lot of our community members do travel for medical appointments from one county to the next. And so those are just things that we need to know to make sure, again, that if this is a need, this is a gap, and then we can identify hopefully funding that we can come in and use to fill that. And so that's going to be our focus this year, is not only updating that plan and identifying what we have available, but hoping to alleviate some of those transportation challenges. As we know, nothing is ever solved, ever, but hoping to alleviate. So we wanted to thank everybody for joining, and I will get out of this screen sharing so we can jump back into the meeting. But I just wanted to make sure that, you do that? Sorry, I can't talk and change the meeting at the same time. It's probably best that somebody else does it for me. But we wanted to jump back in, see if anybody had any questions. Yeah, and we're happy to ask, or if there's anything that you wanted to share with what's going on, or if you have any challenges, just let us know, and so we can share that with the group.
Madison, this is Bart from the
Yes.
NPO.
Hey.
I don't remember y'all mentioning it, but the city of Bryan has a complete streets project coming up.
Oh, okay.
William Joe Bryan from Texas Avenue out to the State Highway 6, and it's gonna include wider sidewalks, bike lanes, pedestrian actuated crossings, mid-block in a couple of places, and at each end of Haswell Park, they're going to have little roundabouts.
Oh, awesome. Traffic calming devices.
And that's scheduled to go to construction in 2022.
Great.
So they're working on the design now.
So that's something within our own community that we can kind of watch, see, and learn from as well. And so these are for some of our rural communities just to come and visit and to see, you know, would that work where we are? Would it not? What would we want to do? What would we want to change? What would we want to keep? So thanks for sharing that, Art. I appreciate it. Okay. And if anybody has anything else, I guess I'd just like to thank everybody for joining us. We really appreciate it. Don't forget to please write your name down in the chat box so we can make sure that we have an attendance for everybody. And at the end of the meeting, we'll make sure to get out that email so you can go and fill out that survey for TxDOT. But if not, thank you all so much for attending. We really appreciate it. And we'll meet again, I guess, in the new year. So thank you. Okay.